Uh, Very good evening to all of you. I welcome you all to the IR webinar. Today we have gathered here to understand the recent affairs with respect to the international relations. I see a lot of you are joining, and welcome to all of you. Very good evening. Very good evening. Priyadarshini, good evening. Lakshmi, good evening. Shubhangini, good evening. Okay, great. So lots of people. Ashok is here. Shrija is here. Ganesh is here. Priyanshu is here. Okay, great. Oh, so many of you, and enthusiastic lot. Great. Welcome to all of you. Let's continue without any further delay. Let's continue and let's see first of all the topics at hand today. So today we are going to discuss. We have 8 broad topics with us. We have the Kaladan project, uh, basically the project which we have been undertaking in Myanmar since a long period of time and unfortunately is not complete yet. Then we have the second very important issue, which is the farmers' protests in Europe. Very important development in the global sphere, the farmer protests. So farmer protests in India also, we are seeing the mobilization of farmers happening very lately, and how the farmers from the region of Punjab, they are trying to reach the national capital region so as to take forward their certain demands. And it's a, I would say, a kind of a deja vu with respect to the previous protests which have happened. But this is not something unique to India only. We are seeing the same thing happening in Europe, and we'll see what are the reasons there also, and how those things are related to India also. We'll try to understand a little bit about that also. Okay. Okay. So some of you are talking about some issues with the uh, with the background or something. So I think there's no issue. But uh, okay, am I audible? Am I audible? I hope things are clear to all of you. Video isn't embedded in the slide. How to fix it? Let it be. Maybe some issues at the technical end, but so be it. As long as you're able to view the slide, and as long as uh, you're with me. Okay, then the third topic we have is the Steadfast Defender. It's a very important exercise being carried on by NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. NATO is carrying out the Steadfast Defender. It's a exercise. It's interdisciplinary. It's a multi-domain exercise. And what's the relevance of that, especially in today's context in 2024, when we see these events happening in relation to what has happened in 2022 and 2023? We'll try to understand that. So we have the Kaladan project, farmers' protests, Steadfast Defender announced by NATO. A little bit about the India-Qatar relations. We have seen Qatar has been in the news with respect to certain ex-Navy officers who were detained in Qatar, and certain deliberations going on with respect to the same. We'll try to understand that. And then we have a new inaugural exercise, Sada Tansik, new development. It's related to Saudi Arabia. More on that when we reach there. Then we have the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. United Nations Relief and Works Agency, a very important UN agency. Again, uh, an agency which has been in news primarily with respect to what is going on between Israel and Hamas since the October 7. From that perspective, we are going to relate the working of United Nations Relief and Works Agency, and how we relate it to the broader functioning of United Nations as a body also. That also we'll see. Then we have a very interesting topic from Africa, ECOWAS, a community in Africa which is related to economic cooperation, and why this has been in news. And we'll relate it to a previous year question also. This has been in news since quite a long period of time. And finally, we have the India UAE bilateral investment treaty. UAE became being the one of the favorite destinations, I would say, for India lately, and at the same time UAE being a very important partner for India in the recent times. In that context, a bilateral investment treaty has also been signed. Modi The Prime Minister of India, Modi, he's recently visited UAE. Now he's in Qatar, and he's again on a trip of West Asia. We'll try to relate it to the broader ideas in West Asia also. So today we have a huge set of these 8 topics with us, through which trying to we'll be trying to understand the nuances across various regions of the international affairs. Okay, great. So let's begin. So the first is the Kaladan project with us, and stay with me. So to understand the Kaladan project, and although Kaladan project is a part of the wider topic of Myanmar, and Myanmar is a part of Southeast Asia, and for us, an important neighbor. From that perspective, let's try to understand few things. And before we move forward, let's try to define some broader contours of how we are going to discuss things. Now, as such, the topic is Kaladan project, and it has been in news primarily because certain events are happening in the area where the Kaladan project is going on. But it is a part of the wider context of what is happening in Myanmar. Myanmar as a region has become very important because lately there are a lot of political crises happening in the particular country. From that perspective, if I say that, okay, Myanmar, from the perspective of PT, what is the importance? The entire country, its geographical location, first of all, that is important. So if you see on the map, you can see we have Myanmar here being an important neighbor of India. This Myanmar as a country is our gateway to Southeast Asia. If you see here, Southeast Asia. Now, India's 2 important policies, I'll relate it, and then we'll take the geography angle forward in this. If I talk about India's 2 policies, very important policies, one is the neighborhood first policy of India. You might know about the neighborhood first policy, first talked about by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi in 2014. And then we have the second policy, which is Act East policy, again pronounced by the Prime Minister Modi after he took over the office in 2014. Myanmar as a neighbor is a part of both these policies. It is a part of neighborhood first because it is our neighbor, and it is also a part of Act East because it is also a part of our Act East policy because it is to the east of India. So from that perspective, the country is very important. And if you see here, you'll be amazed to know that Myanmar as a country is a land bridge which connects 2 important regions. It's a part of it's a part of the India's 2 policies, and at the same time, it's a land bridge. The word is land bridge. It's a land bridge to connect 2 important areas or regions, as we say in international relations. It is South Asia with Southeast Asia. So, looking at from that perspective, Myanmar as a region borders Bangladesh, India, China, Laos, and Thailand. So, the 5 countries are directly impacted by whatever goes on in Myanmar. It's a very important development for us, and for PT, we'll remember the countries which are bordering Myanmar. Okay, let's take the discussion forward. So, here is the news article from February 2024. It says India's Kaladan project almost dead after Paletwa fell to Arakan army. A senior Myanmar opposition leader is making such comments. We are not interested per se with the comment being made by a senior Myanmar opposition leader. We are more concerned with what is the news and in what context the news is coming to us. Okay. Now, if we talk here about the Kaladan project, first of all, the Kaladan project, if you see, it is a very important project for India. Now, first of all, let's try to relate it from the mains perspective. Few things. Why are we going ahead with Kaladan project? We have talked about Kaladan project since a very long time, and in this project, what we are trying to do is we are trying to have a multimodal transit corridor. which is essentially a part of connectivity initiatives. Now, connectivity initiatives for any country are very, very important. Why? It is one of the ways through which certain economic goals will be realized, and it is also an important consideration through which certain geopolitical or strategic goals will also be realized. So always remember, whenever connectivity projects come, we'll be discussing connectivity with respect to India Middle East Economic Corridor also. When we discuss UAE, we have similarly a Kaladan project also. Although the scope of IMEC is much larger than that of Kaladan, but at the end of the day, both are connectivity projects. And long back, when we started with Kaladan project, the idea was better integration of South Asia and Southeast Asia, the leadership role being given by India. From that perspective, we started. So always keep in mind this main perspective as to why we are doing a certain thing. Now it's a multimodal transport corridor, which is important. It connects. It connects which area? It connects Calcutta in India to first node is the Sitwe port. If you see, this sea route will be undertaken, and then from the Sitwe port down the line we have a inland waterway corridor. Okay, inland waterways. After that, we have certain highway connectivity through which we'll reach India. So that's good, very good. Okay, we have a platform. This entire project is going on. A sea route is there, an inland transport corridor is there. After that, we have the highway also, and through that, India will be connected to another part of India, which is Mizoram, via Myanmar. And through this, connectivity will improve, economic relations will improve. That is a win-win situation, because Myanmar as a country also requires assistance by big players, and India is obviously a bigger player than Myanmar. So India is coming to help. India will be pouring in certain amounts of investments. India will be helping with respect to the building of resources, and this entire structure will be built. Unfortunately, still not built. Why not built? Already heavily delayed, and now we are saying, we are making this extreme statement, it's almost dead. Obviously it is not almost dead, but the only concern is that the area Paletwa, here the word Paletwa, if you see, is written, and if you see here the next page, we have this particular area Paletwa in Myanmar. This particular area, Paletwa, it's a region, it's a place in Myanmar, and this area has fallen in the hands of certain insurgents or certain ethnic organizations. And these organizations are at war with the regime in Myanmar. That is why a Myanmar official is saying that the project is virtually dead, because now that Paletwa is not in our hands anymore. That Paletwa is not being controlled by the Myanmar's government, so as to say, in as of today. So that is why he's making a comment that okay, it is virtually dead or almost dead. Definitely, we can reach out to the ethnic insurgent groups also, and we can take the discussion forward from there also. Although reaching out to ethnic insurgent groups is not something which India will do in the first place. Yes, if it comes to, let's say, if the push comes to shove, then we may go there also, but we'll not. We'll wait for the right time. So, first of all, it's an extreme statement. Nevertheless, the importance is that Kaladan is in news. The importance is the place Paletwa is in news. These both things are important from the PT perspective. Now, let's take the discussion forward, and let me discuss. Let me discuss why a particular place called Paletwa has gone outside the hands of the Myanmar's regime. To understand this, first we have to understand that what is the situation in Myanmar. Now, Myanmar as a country has this triangular architecture in place today. Triangular architecture here simply refers to the fact that there are three important poles in Myanmar as of today, which are doing things in Myanmar, so as to say in very simple words. First is the third one, which is written here, which is the Tatmadaw or the military. This is first pole or the first important center in Myanmar as of today. Now, military has taken over in Myanmar. See, Myanmar as a country, you all should be aware that Myanmar as a country has numerous religious and ethnic groups. These numerous religious and ethnic groups, they are not happy with each other, so they have not been able to reconcile amongst themselves. I can simply also say that there is a lot of diversity. Okay. Now, Myanmar has a lot of diversity, just like India has a lot of diversity. And just like in 1947, we started a process that we all are Indians when we got independent. And whenever you read your polity or your, let's say, you are doing some deeper analysis, you will come to know that whenever we talk about India as a nation, I'll use the word nation. Okay. India as a nation. Okay. India as a nation is a very important idea which starts with 1947. And how nation? A political nation. Because before that, the word India did not have a political significance. Yes, India was largely used as a geographical word for the territory in which these people, which we call today as Indians, were living. But before that, what happened was India was largely said to be a geographical entity. But in 47, we said India is a nation and all people living inside this territory, they are one. With nation comes the idea that we are one. And we have to have this idea, especially in a society which is a diverse society. We are a diverse society. Myanmar is a diverse society. They have various religious and ethnic groups. We came together in 47 and created a nation. And we have challenges with respect to this. Sometimes we will face a challenge that, okay, the fact that we are one will be questioned. The fact that we are one will be something which will be you can say which will come under criticism, or which will be tested, that whether we are one or not, because there are so many diversity there are so many divisions amongst each others, leading to this diversity, and it creates a lot of problems. Despite that, we are one. That is something which we have taken upon ourselves in 47. Myanmar has not been able to do this, and as a result of which, these religious and ethnic groups, they are unable to live in peace with each other. As a result of which, there are a lot of conflicts in Myanmar, and unfortunately, because of these conflicts, the military is very strong in Myanmar, and as a result of which, the military has been ruling Myanmar, and this has been an important aspect in Myanmar's politics. Military regime. Sometimes you will hear the word military junta. It's called as junta. It's written as JUNTA. It's called as military junta. Military junta is the military regime in Myanmar. It is ruling since the time India got independence, but at the same time, democratic forces were continuously trying to have power in Myanmar. And in 2016, finally democracy came to Myanmar. The leader, Aung San Suu Kyi. I hope you have heard about her, Aung San Suu Kyi. She was given a Nobel Prize also. Unfortunately, the Nobel Prize was taken away from her. We'll talk about that later on. Okay. Now, in 2016, when Aung San Suu Kyi, when she was able to finally have democracy, because she had been fighting since more than 40 years in Myanmar, and she was able to convince the military rulers that power should be given to the representatives of the people. This was a very important development in Myanmar's politics, because the military junta, which was ruling Myanmar, agreed to give up power. And when they agreed to give up power, India was also happy that, okay, democracy is coming in our neighborhood. The only problem was that this happiness was short-lived. 2016, democracy comes to Myanmar. 2021, again, there is a military coup. Now there is a military coup, and because of this, what is happening is, stay with me. Now, because there is a military coup, let me write the timeline for you. 2016 is the time when NLD comes to power. NLD is National League for Democracy. It's a party in Myanmar represented primarily by Aung San Suu Kyi. And now NLD comes to power. These are democratic forces. Okay. 2021, the February of 2021, there is a coup. There is a coup by the military generals. And again, what happens? They occupy power. Now what is happening in Myanmar is that since 2021, again the military generals, they are ruling. Whenever there is a situation whereby the military rules a country, we call it the military regime. Okay, remember the word. We'll do these things side by side. So there is a military regime in Myanmar. That simply means the military generals are governing Myanmar since February 2021. They gave up power in 2016. So 5 years of democracy. Unfortunately, only 5 years of democracy. 2021, they are back. And now we are talking today about February 2024 when we are having this session. During this entire time, there is problem, there is conflicts, there is violence. Why? Because on one hand side, we have the military generals who are called as the military junta, or if you see here, it says Tatmadaw or the military. Tatmadaw or the military. Tatmadaw is a word used. Okay, it's a place from where the military operates. So whatever the military headquarters are, okay, they are many times used in international relations articles. They simply signify that, okay, military is important or the military architecture is important. For example, I'll tell you, in any article, if you read on Russia, sometimes they will say Moscow, because Moscow is the main decision-making center of Russia. But sometimes it will say Kremlin in Russia. Now, Kremlin is, whenever the word Kremlin is used in any article, the meaning is they are talking about the military architecture, which is also important in any country. Try to understand. When we talk about no, Tatmadaw is not. It's a place. It's a place. Tatmadaw is a place. Okay. The idea is, yes, absolutely. Vivek is good. Vivek is right when he says, like Rawalpindi. When we refer to Pakistan, Rawalpindi, the idea is, okay, what is coming from the military building? Okay, there is a civilian building in Pakistan. There is a military building. So whenever we say, okay, military is saying something, that time we use this word. In Russia, we use Kremlin because that is where the military resides, or that is what is, you can say, the stronghold of military. Similarly, in US, you will read Pentagon. Pentagon says something, White House says something. White House is Joe Biden saying something. Pentagon is what is the military of USA saying. That is the meaning. We don't have this in India because we don't allow the military this kind of a public exposure in India. No, we don't have. So you will never see, with respect to India, it will always be New Delhi. Always remember. So don't worry about these things. Tatmadaw place, it's basically a place from where the military operates. So coming back, so we have February 2021, the military taking over again. And in these years from February 2021 to today, which is the February of 2024, we have this conflict going on whereby the military junta, this can be called as the government in Myanmar, and it is fighting with two important entities. One is NUG and the other is ethnic armed organizations. Stay with me. Military junta, you can call it the government. Okay, as of now, it is the de facto government. NUG is National Unity Government. What is NUG? NUG is National Unity Government. And what is National Unity Government? It is nothing but the government officials which were ruling before this coup took place, along with some military personnel who have joined them. All of them have together come and they have created a front, and that front is called as National Unity Government, which is the second important pillar. If you see, it is written in the first point here, the political class, the politicians primarily, they are unrecognized national unity group. National unity government also they say it. So sometimes you'll find it these kinds of things. Okay. Now, what will be the relationship of how India is going to be get affected with this all? Wait for it, we'll come there also. But as of now, a brief introduction to this. So we have the military junta ruling, we have the NUG, with which they are having this conflict, and we have the ethnic armed organizations. Now, these ethnic armed organizations are the third important actor in Myanmar today. These ethnic armed organizations, ethnic, different ethnicities. Why? Multi-religious diversity in Myanmar. They have come together, they have created a front. Why they have created a front? Because they want to fight the military junta. That is why they have created a front, which is the third important pillar in Myanmar today. Here it is written in the second point, if you can see, three brotherhood alliance comprising the Myanmar National Democratic Alliance Army first, second the Arakan Army, and the third is the Tang National Liberation. Three actors which are written here. Okay, now these three actors you have to remember for PT. Otherwise, in mains, even if you simply write three brotherhood alliance, that is also fine. But for PT, you should remember the three names: Myanmar National Democratic Alliance Army, Arakan Army. Arakan, the name goes with the geographical feature. Which geographical feature is named? Which geographical feature has a similar name? Who will tell me in the comments? So, and the third is the Tang National Liberation. So all of these together, they are called as ethnic armed organizations. Very good. Mountains, Arakan Yoma, GI is saying good. Okay, others are also saying great. So this is the triangular thing which is going on in Myanmar today. And today when this is going on, we'll see. Stay with me because we are going to relate India here. These three are fighting. These two are fighting with the military regime continuously. And it is in this context that Paletwa has gone into the hands of these ethnic armed organizations, and some leaders are making comments that because Paletwa is gone, Kaladan will be dead. Nothing like this will happen. Don't worry. But definitely, it is becoming difficult for us to complete. Now, it's very important here to understand the entire context. See, whenever we are not able to deliver on our projects, which we promise, and we also promise, and it is very important today because we have to look this in conjunction with China's Belt and Road Initiative. China is also making so many projects. We are also making so many projects in the world. Unfortunately, if we are not able to deliver on those projects, then that is something which deteriorates India's relationship and India's position in the world, which we don't want because we are putting a lot of energy. So from that perspective, Kaladan will get further delayed. Kaladan was supposed to be completed in 2014. It dragged on till 2013, and even today it is not complete. So from that perspective, yes, it is a setback, but does it mean that it's the end of Kaladan project? Definitely not. But what will happen? We'll have to wait. And now let's do one thing. Let's do one thing. Let's take it further from here. So, okay, so some questions are coming that the webinar is mains based. No, the webinar is mains and PT based, and whatever topics I think are important, I'll go into a little bit more detail. There are one or two topics which are more important from factual perspective, so I'll keep the discussion short there. Okay, now let's continue. Before we continue, I'll give you a keyword for IR which you can use in your mains. This is called as delivery deficit. Delivery deficit is when India is unable to deliver on the projects. Then this word delivery deficit is used. Write it somewhere on your notes, side by side, and use it in your answers, mains answers. Delivery deficit. Okay, let's continue. Now, so we have seen that there are these three players which are working out of Myanmar. And now let's take the discussion forward, whereby I want to tell you what is happening in Myanmar as of February 2024. In the last 4 months, some developments have happened in Myanmar. These developments are, if you see here, loss in territory and fissures in the military structure. They are very important developments. Loss in territory. This is where the Paletwa gets related. Paletwa has come under the hands of the ethnic armed organizations, it has gone from the hands of military. And that is where gradually what we are seeing is that these actors, they are playing some important role, taking power away from the military, fighting with them. Make no mistake, a fight is ongoing in Myanmar. Continuous fighting is going on. There's a lot of violence, unfortunately. And unfortunately, India is not doing enough for that also. Nevertheless, now let's take the discussion forward. So, ethnic armed organizations have taken over. Loss in territory is used in this context, that slowly military is losing some territory. At the same time, what is happening is there are fissures in military structure. Fissures means that there are the military itself, the people in military, the soldiers in military, the officers of military, they are questioning their higher officials, and they are, unfortunately, they are deserting the military. They have left the fight. They have given up arms because two reasons. One, they don't believe in the work of their own military, and second is the other organizations. These two organizations, NUG and EIOs, they are also playing an important role, and they are fearful of them also. Both these things, but at the same time, what they do is they are creating a situation whereby the military power is decreasing. In this scenario, what is going to happen? We will discuss this part. So, because military is losing territory and because military's own infrastructure is falling, so what we are seeing is these kinds of events. And we also saw that a certain contingent of army soldiers, they came towards the Indian side of the border while fighting with these insurgents. And recently the Indian government has said that we'll be returning these people also. But Myanmar's military is not happy because their own military soldiers are deserting the army, because their morale is down, and many of them don't believe in what the military is doing, because the military has taken over and they are ruling in a manner whereby there is excessive arbitrariness, and the political class is subjugated. There is violence, there are fake cases being made against the political class. And in that same line of thought, Aung San Suu Kyi, the main leader, the main face of democracy in Myanmar, she was also slapped with many cases, and as of now she is in house arrest. So this situation is very grave in Myanmar. And in this situation, let's take the discussion forward and let's introduce India also into Myanmar. So when we talk about India also, first of all, we have to understand India's concerns. And here I would introduce a certain kind of a realism in your thinking with respect to IR. That when we talk about IR, we have to be a little realistic also. We are not saying we don't have to adhere to principles, but we have to be realistic also. Why I am saying this? Because this is something which is driving India's policy towards Myanmar. To understand this, what is India's policy towards Myanmar, let me talk a little bit here about the fact that we discussed here that for India, there are these two policies in which Myanmar fits: neighborhood first and act east. Now, that's a good thing. Okay. That means Myanmar is important to us. Fine. Now, if we see that when we talk about Myanmar, Myanmar's primary importance comes to us from the fact that Myanmar's location is such that Myanmar can help us with respect to insurgency in Northeast. Try to understand this. Insurgency in Northeast is something which is a big concern for us. Northeast, you all have been watching the news and you all know that the situation last year, especially in Manipur, was grave. So we have this highly sensitive situation in Northeast, and Myanmar has been helping us with respect to the insurgents which go and take refuge in Myanmar. So Myanmar has been helping me. But the problem is Myanmar's regime is committing worst of the human rights violations as of today. And India being this regional player, and at the same time, India being a country which aspires to be a Vishwa Guru, and it aspires to be the leader of the global the entire globe, I would say. I would not restrict ourselves to global south, but India, which aspires to be a Vishwa Guru, has not said enough so that this problem can be resolved. Why? Because India has interests, which is India wants to handle insurgency. So what India is doing is India has taken a very soft stand, I would say, and India is trying to balance so that this problem gets solved and we don't have to worry about some kind of a problem in the relationship between India and Myanmar. Why problem? Because if you go and criticize the Myanmar's regime today, there may be a certain kind of a backlash. And this backlash is not good for us, may not be good for us, because what it will do is it may push Myanmar's military generals more closer to China, and already they are more closer to China. So what we are doing is, despite the gross violations happening in Myanmar, we have not outrightly criticized the Myanmar's regime. Okay. And in this line, I have something to share with you. If you see it at the screen, India, along with Russia and China, abstained from a UN Security Council resolution which was criticizing Myanmar's military regime in December 2022. We abstained, while the other players, they have voted against. And the West is pressurizing Myanmar to improve the situation. We also want the situation to be improved. All we are doing is we are not being outrightly explicit about this. On the contrary, we have abstained in this resolution in 2022. But at the same time, what we are doing is we continue to provide humanitarian assistance to the displaced communities. So, given the precarious situation in Myanmar, what we have adopted is a policy whereby we are supporting them via humanitarian assistance. That is what we are doing. And at the same time, principally, what we are saying is that in a democratic manner, the conflict should be resolved. Which conflict should be resolved? This conflict should be resolved. This triangular which has happened, we are saying, let the democracy take roots again. But this is something which we say in principle. We are not actively doing anything for this. Okay, always remember this. Now, however, India has refused to criticize the military regime. I told you the fourth point. Okay, this is what is India's policy towards Myanmar. Scholars are divided. Some are saying India should do more. India, as a regional player, has a responsibility. The others are saying we should be more realistic, despite the fact that we feel for the people of Myanmar. Our intervention may create problems with the military regime, and we should adopt a policy whereby we may continue to provide humanitarian assistance, but we should not be proactive in any other manner. That is what is the suggestion by the second group of people. Fine. The government of India probably is going with the second group of scholars. Now, so for us, for means, what we can suggest is that India can follow the ASEAN 5-point consensus. Now, when we talk about ASEAN 5-point consensus, it's a consensus which has been created by ASEAN, and ASEAN expects all the countries to follow this. As a part of this, there are 5 points. The 5 points revolve around the fact that there should be some envoys which should be appointed, and these envoys should go and they should talk to the military regime in Myanmar, and they should, when they talk, there should be ceasefire, end of violence, and via democratic means, via dialogue, via talking, the parties should resolve issue and they should give up the path of violence. This is what is primarily the 5-point consensus by ASEAN. But for this, a special envoy will be appointed. Envoy is nothing but like an ambassador will be appointed, and ASEAN already has an ambassador who is also talking. This is something which ASEAN expects other countries to do also. So India should also support this process, is something which we are saying. Okay. Second is, India should use its influence to open channels of dialogue. India should use its influence to open channels of dialogue with and between the junta and the opposition, including the armed groups. This suggestion is given by the second group of people who say India should be proactive. Okay. Now, envoy will be from ASEAN itself. ASEAN is appointing the envoy. We already have an envoy who is talking to the players. Okay. So envoys are in generally appointed so as to carry out a certain task. Okay. Uh, yes, it is. It is more like uh, waiting and watching and being the generous player as of now, and letting the ASEAN or other players take the lead. That's a better approach. Okay. So some of you are asking in the comment, can we say this? Can we write Gujarat Doctrine? Gujarat Doctrine. We are doing something on the lines of Gujarat Doctrine only. Okay. Fine. Good. Let's continue. Fine. So India-Myanmar cooperation is an additional thing which I took. Although I'll not go into the details of this, but you should simply know that when it comes to India-Myanmar cooperation, connectivity, development cooperation, okay, and the third is P2P. These are the main areas through which India and Myanmar have a relationship. Okay, just remember this. Let's move it forward. Now we have the farmers' protests in Europe. Very important topic. And how to understand this topic? It is happening in entire Europe. It is not happening in one country. That is the first thing which is very important. That means something grave is happening. And why is this something grave happening? Okay. See, if you can see these colored tractors, they are the Belgium farmers who are targeting the EU meeting. Okay. EU is European Union. Those of you who are not aware about the European Union is a political and economic alliance of number of countries who come together and they collectively make policies. Which kind of policies they collectively make? Now it's a very important and it's a unique model. They collectively make fiscal policies and monetary policies. Generally, fiscal policy and monetary policy is the task of a state, but European Union is doing it over and above the individual state. The meaning, France is making its policy, Germany is making its policy, Spain is making its policy, but EU is also making another policy. That is what EU is. It's a political and economic alliance which makes fiscal and economic policies. Why we are discussing this? Because it is directly related to why the farmers are protesting in entire Europe. Because some policy is being made which is a pain for all the farmers of Europe. Otherwise, why would all farmers in Europe protest? There may be protests with a certain set of countries or a particular country, but we are seeing protests across more than 9 countries of Europe. And these protests are a part of the general bigger problems which are happening in Europe. From this topic, we'll try to understand what is happening in Europe as of today. Okay. Now, very good. Some people are saying European Union has even its own currency called Euro. Very good. Okay. Now, let's take it forward. Why are the farmers protesting in Europe? Multiple reasons are there. The first important reason for this is the EU's shift towards green policies. Now, as a part of climate change which is happening, we are seeing continuously that countries are taking up more and more measures so as to shift towards greener sources of energy. And when we talk about this, we have this EU's green policies which have come up. And in this EU's green policies, a very important aspect is the Green Deal which is coming up. The Green Deal is essentially EU's steps so as to transition European Union towards a more greener economy and a society. Just like we have given commitments, the national determined contributions which we have given as a part of the Paris Treaty. And in addition to that, also, we are undertaking a lot of steps to move towards greener way of living. Similarly, EU is doing. And in that context, you have to remember this for PT purpose, there is a Green Deal. Green Deal is nothing but a set of policy measures which the EU intends to implement in all the countries so that they can realize their goals with respect to climate. That is what is Green Deal. Okay. Now, EU has given a pledge. If you see the third point, EU, in keeping with the pledges of becoming climate neutral by 2050, has proposed the Green Deal. This is something which is going on. As a part of this Green Deal, what they'll be doing is they're asking farmers to adopt those practices which can help in addressing climate change. Unfortunately, those practices also may hamper the produce. Either they may hamper the produce or they may reduce the wages or the income of the farmers. And because of this, the farmers are taking the hit. And that is why one reason for the protest is the kind of policies which are being made, they are being opposed by the farmers across the Europe. Okay. Now, what are the kind of policies? There are a number of things which are going on. For example, EU is saying farmers have to reduce fertilizer use by at least 20%, or they have to keep at least 4% of their land fallow. Fallow means empty, if they wish to keep receiving the EU aid. So you will not be given the money which EU is supposed to give if you don't leave your land fallow for a certain percentage, or you don't reduce the fertilizer use by 20%. This is the kind of policies I'm trying to tell you. So there are a number of policies which are there. Okay. Now, this is the EU aid is more like a subsidy system. Okay. So this is one such thing. Germany, the farmers are protesting because the fuel subsidy is getting cut. At the same time, the Dutch are saying they are not happy because there are new limitations on the farm nitrogen emissions. So this protest is not something new. In 2019 itself, the Dutch farmers are protesting. So if you can see, as you can see, all these are examples with respect to the green policies. This is the first important point why the farmers are protesting. Now, the second is to do with the changes in the weather. In Greece, if you see, wildfires have burnt 20% of the annual farm revenue. As a result of which, what we are seeing is a protests. See, farmers across the world, they are not happy because climate change has reduced the yields. In India also, when you read your economics, you will come across the fact that productivity is a major concern in India. And productivity, that aspect is something which we are concerned about, but it has to do a lot with climate. So climate change, in generally, what is happening is something which is creating problems for the farmers and in generally the agriculture. Okay. Now, the third issue. So this is the changes in the weather is the second point for us. The first point, let me write it here so that while you take down the notes, it becomes easier for you. And then we have the third point. According to the French farmers, EU's free trade agreements will create, as of now it is not, will create competition that is impossible to overcome. So what is being done is EU is negotiating some free trade agreements. How many of you know that EU is also negotiating a FTA with India? It was a UPSC prelims question once. They asked EU's FTA with India. We have been negotiating an FTA with EU since a long period of time and we have not been able to finalize it till today, 2024. But EU is negotiating FTAs with others also, and already they have some FTAs and they are in the process of having this FTA with a South American economic bloc called Mercosur. Something important for PT for you. A South American bloc, Mercosur, they are now negotiating FTA with them. So farmers are saying already we are facing competition from Chile, Argentina, and Australia, and now Mercosur will also get added. What is Mercosur? Mercosur is nothing but a group of countries in South America which together have come and they collectively make policies. So as a group, they indulge with another group called EU. Okay, just like we have SARC in South Asia, similarly there is Mercosur in South America. So new, maybe a new entity for you, Mercosur. Now, so this third issue, which is how the trade agreement is being negotiated, farmers are not happy. They are saying it will be a problem for us. If you have been following the news, you might have come across uh, India's uh, a kind of FTA. It would be wrong to call it a FTA. It's a preliminary step to a FTA. We have negotiated a particular agreement with Australia in 2022. In December 2022, we have signed an agreement with Australia, as a part of which also what we are doing is we are giving some relaxation to Australian imports, and they are giving some relaxation to our exports. One of the reasons why that particular deal has been problematic is because agriculture goods will come to India, agriculture products will come to India, which may threaten the agriculture industry. So there are some people who are not happy with the FTA which we have signed with Australia. Okay. Similarly, EU's FTA is generating a lot of discontent in the farming community that we'll have to compete with those products which are probably cheaper. Fine. Third important point. Now, a fourth important point. This is just some more examples for you, some more points which you can add to the previous arguments only. Same arguments. The nature of it's the content is only changed, but the argument remains the same here also. Next important point. The fourth point is this. Now this has nothing to do with economics. This has to do with politics. And now here I will also ask you, please, whenever you are doing your analysis, ensure that economic analysis are together going on with political analysis also. Okay, political analysis. Let's see what this is. Political observers fear agriculture grievances might become a site for the resurgence of far right. Far right. We are talking about far right sentiments. These far right sentiments are high. Far right. We are not right, we are far right. Far right simply means that conservative lot in Europe, which is talking about what? Which is talking primarily about anti immigration, which is talking about, or which is kind of creating xenophobia. There is another section. There is an entire section in Europe which is rising. It is called as far right. They are the ultra nationalists, ultra conservatives, and there may be many agendas of those kind of people. But one important agenda of the far right in Europe is that they are anti-immigration, and unfortunately, many of them are anti all those policies which address the climate change also, and that is why it says anti-climate also, and anti, unfortunately they're anti-EU also. Don't go with EU, come out of EU, many will say. This is who are these far right sections. They are rising in Europe. Far right sections, Alternative for Democracy in Germany, Alternative Front basically. There is Union of Romanians in Romania. There is French National Front. French National Front, very important. Okay. These kinds of groups which are emerging, unfortunately, whenever the far right emerges, far right relates to something related to indigenous capacities. Agriculture is an emotive issue everywhere. Far rightists are saying all those policies which are not benefiting the agriculture community of our country, all those policies should not be adopted, even if that means going against those policies which address climate change. They are saying let it be, and they are giving support to all the farmer movements. because farmer movements for them means indigenous native movements, and nativism is an important plank in the narrative of all the far rightists. That is what is the agenda here. If you see, German chancellor is saying, while announcing policies to ease farmers' anger, they are announcing policies. Now the protests are going on, and all the countries, they have become soft with respect to all those policies which they were earlier going ahead with. They have recently said that rage is being stoked deliberately by far right parties. Rage is being stoked. That means far right parties are taking benefit of all these issues which are going on in Europe, and they are provoking them. They are giving them support, and that is a big problem. And that is where a political angle gets involved to an issue which was economic, whereby the political narrative is created that this is an issue of the natives versus all those policies which may be in line with climate change addressing, which may be, unfortunately, uh, be protecting the environment itself, but they are against that because they are saying we side with the concerns of farmers. See, at this point of time, it is very important for you to understand that if we go ahead with something like this, whereby we reduce all those policies which were taking care of environment, its negative impact will again be on agriculture, because we are seeing the negative impacts of climate change on agriculture happening. So we can't simply say that all those green policies should be revoked or rolled back. No. But because the far rightists are now giving their political support to the ideas of farmers, we are not seeing all the grievances of farmers are problematic. But there has to be a balance. But the far rightists are giving their support to the farmers, and in many of the rallies of the farmers, these far rightist groups, they have come forward by giving support to them. So German chancellor is saying that this rage is anger, is being stoked deliberately this is being created. So that's a political angle, which is the fourth point for us. Okay, so that is why the farmers are protesting. Now let's take it forward. Nikhil is saying in India, leftists are supporting separatist forces by supporting middlemen protests and writers on Punjab Haryana border. See, uh, fine, right and left, they'll keep on fighting. Uh, but yes, good point is that in India, you will not see the rightists supporting the farmers, it is the leftists. Generally, it will always be those of you who know, those of you who don't know these things, you might be in a certain stage in your preparation. Don't worry, try to understand whatever you can and try to absorb more things. Eventually, you will get there. But generally, it is the leftists who will support the farmers, not the rightists. But in this case, it is the rightists which are supporting the farmers' protest, and that is why it is unique also. Okay. Vivek is saying, can we say EU is on the brink of getting dissolved? No. We can't say that. We can't say that. It's too early. EU is a project which is building since 1950s, and it has remained intact since then. We can't say it's on the brink, but definitely there are divisions in EU. But that is a topic for some time else. Let's come back to the topic. So now we have to see the government response. So these points are basically all those points which show that the government has given into the demands and they are going slow with respect to the environmental regulations. If you see, the European Commission has proposed to limit the flow of cheap Ukrainian imports. So Ukraine war, what it has done is, earlier it kind of disrupted the goods which were going from Ukraine to other parts of Europe. As a result of which, the domestic demand increased, which was helping the farmers. But now the Ukraine is able to supply. So what is happening is cheap imports are coming, and again the farmers of other European countries, they are feeling the brunt, so they are not happy. But what the European Commission has done, they are saying we limit the inflow of cheap imports from Ukraine so that your interests are taken care of. Okay. And they have also eased some environmental measures, such as exempting the farmers from keeping their land fallow. We talked about this. So you don't have to leave your land fallow. These kinds of exemptions. Similarly, Portugal has announced 500 million euro aid, which is going to have a 55% reduction in tax on diesel fuel and some funds to support organic farming. On similar lines, the French president has also made comments. So you can read this part. This is not something which is I would say needs to be explained. This is for you, for your own consumption. But the broad idea, government's response is government has toned down the policy part. Okay, fine. So this was about the farmers' protest. Important topic from the I would say examination perspective. It is important. Small things like Green Deal for PT perspective. Rest the issue is important, and we'll see where this issue goes in the future also. So you'll have to track this. It's a good issue. Now comes the steadfast defender. Okay. Now, when we talk about steadfast defender, what is this steadfast defender? Steadfast defender, first of all, has been announced in 2024, and steadfast December is it's a exercise announced in 24 by NATO. Now, last year there's a question on NATO, and since the last 3 years NATO has been in news. It's an important topic from the examination perspective. I would say they have asked about NATO in mains, but they have not asked NATO in PT yet. So from PT perspective, NATO is important. But now this is steadfast defender. It's an exercise. Those of you who have been following this preparation since a long period of time would know that all these exercises keep on happening. There are many exercises which India does with many other countries. Just like that, there are exercises being done at the level of NATO also. One such exercise is steadfast defender. First of all, this is what steadfast defender is. Now, let's take it forward. It says NATO's steadfast defender 2024. It is unprecedented military exercise which signals alliance unity and preparedness. Now, let's talk about this. When I talk about this particular steadfast defender exercise, it's a exercise by NATO. Now, what is NATO? NATO is North Atlantic Treaty Organization, fine, which primarily works on the principle of collective defense. This idea of collective defense is very important for us. When I talk about collective defense, okay, yellow color is not visible. Stay with me. NATO works on the principle of collective defense. The principle of collective defense says one for all and all for one. One for all and all for one means if there will be an attack on one country, all the countries which are a part of NATO, they will come to the aid of that particular country. That is the meaning of collective defense, or one for all and all for one. Okay, this is written in Article 5 of NATO's treaty. NATO was formed in 1949. The lead was taken by US. What does NATO do? It's a collective defense pact between whom? Between North American countries and Europe. In North America, we have two countries, USA and Canada. And in Europe, we have the remaining countries. Together, we have 31 countries, and Sweden will also join after ratification by all players. So, over a period of few weeks, we'll have 32 members of NATO. Very quick revision. NATO, 31 members. Sweden will get added. Started in 1949 because USA wanted to take the lead in bringing together Europe. It's a collective defense pact as per which all the countries will be there for each other. That is what NATO is. Now, steadfast defender. If you see, it says unprecedented military exercise. It has not been done till now. Why unprecedented? Because unprecedented word tells me that this has not been done. This exercise has not been done because 90,000 troops are being mobilized to have some kind of a joint training with respect to land, sea, air, space, cyberspace. In all these 5 domains, what will happen is troops, 90,000 troops from across the NATO countries, they will be mobilized and they will be doing joint training exercises from January till May. January till May 2024. These are the exercises which they'll be doing. Now, the problem is, the question which you should come to your mind is, sir, why is this important? This is important because you need to understand the psyche of the examination setter. They are asking NATO, which is in news since last 3 years. NATO since last 3 years has been doing some things. Steadfast Defender is one of a kind activity. UPSC is not going to ask you, okay, what is Steadfast Defender only? They may ask you in PT, what is Steadfast Defender? But try to understand what is NATO doing. They can ask you in mains this part. They are mobilizing 90,000 troops, which has not been done since the Cold War times. Why are you doing it now? That means there is some kind of a threat. Are you visualizing some kind of a threat? Or is it just a training exercise? It is not just a training exercise. It is preparedness, because they are feeling that the threats are there. What kind of threats are there? The threats which are emerging from the nexus of Russia and China. They both are having a confrontation with US. Obviously, China is of lesser significance, but when it comes to Russia, Russia has a conflict with NATO. NATO has declared Russia to be an enemy. NATO has declared in their vision document that Russia is the most important strategic threat and Russia has to be handled. And we already know that Ukraine-Russia war is going on. So in Europe, what is happening is they are building their capabilities, as a part of which this steadfast exercise is also being conducted. So this is the context of this exercise. After that, there are specifics that this exercise will go on from Jan till May 2024, 90,000 troops, which will be doing operations across these 5 domains. Collectively, the militaries of these countries, NATO countries, they'll come together and they'll develop cooperation, build resilience, and move towards interoperable functions. That is what they intend to do. Okay, from this perspective, you have to keep this steadfast defender exercise also in mind. Okay, and please keep the idea that this context is continuous preparations being made by NATO. That is what is the main idea. You'll be amazed to know, okay, let this be a question for you. Does NATO look towards India also with some kind of a cooperative lenses? Do NATO wants to do some cooperation with India? First question. Second question for you, can India be a part of NATO? 2 questions. Think of the answers. Okay. Now, let's take the discussion forward. And before that, we have a very easy question for you guys. This very easy question is, so many of, okay, good. NATO plus framework. Okay. First of all, NATO can have some other partners through a NATO plus framework. NATO plus framework means NATO will have collaboration with other countries which are not members of NATO. Very important. Who can be members of NATO? Only European country can be a member of NATO, plus USA and Canada are part of NATO from North America. Okay. Otherwise, to be a member of NATO, you have to be a European country. To be a member of NATO, you also should have democracy. If you don't have democracy, you cannot be a member of NATO. Okay. Now, so this is NATO. How many members? 31, plus Sweden will come. Earlier there were 30 members. The 31st member is Finland. Remember this for PT. Now, NATO plus framework is a framework whereby NATO has cooperation with other countries which are not members of NATO. And this NATO plus framework, NATO has 5 such countries with which they have this relationship. These 5 countries are Japan, Australia, South Korea, Israel, No, Mexico is not a part of NATO. Aditya, Mexico is not a part of NATO. No. And fifth is New Zealand. Okay. Remember this for PT, NATO plus framework, 5 other countries. NATO wanted. India should also be included. Wanted. Okay. NATO plus framework. We can't be a member of NATO. We can be a part of NATO plus framework. NATO, US, there are voices which want India to be included. We are not being a part of this. Just remember this as a matter of fact. And now let's do the question. Question says, consider the following statements with respect to NATO. The first is, it is a military and security alliance established by the Washington Treaty. Absolutely correct. Washington Treaty is the name given to the 1949 treaty. Okay. So remember this. This is the correct statement. NATO has never operationalized Article 5 of collective security. Never operationalized Article 5 of collective security. What is Article 5 of collective security? This Article 5 is of this treaty. This Article 5 of collective security is this article. One for all and all for one. Okay. Now, this second statement is an incorrect statement. The answer is C. Why is this? Because, okay, you're right. Most of you are right. Very good. The doubts which are coming up, good. Okay. Stay with me. NATO has operationalized Article 5 after the 9/11 attack. Article 5 was operationalized. Article 5 simply says that NATO will go ahead and take military action against a country, and either they can do it under the framework of NATO, or if UN also says, then also NATO can do it. So after 9/11, Article 5 was invoked, and collectively the NATO forces then reached Afghanistan and carried forward the occupation in Afghanistan, whereby they went ahead with global war on terrorism. Okay. So the second statement is incorrect. The correct answer is C. Easy question, I would say. Let's take the discussion forward. Now we come to the India-Qatar relationships. Okay. Now, when it comes to Qatar as a country, I will not say that Qatar as a country may be asked in mains specifically, because Qatar is a relatively smaller player in the Gulf region, and at the same time, we don't have this multi-dimensional relationship with Qatar. Okay. So from that perspective, I have included this just because there was this discussion going on with respect to the 8 convicted Navy veterans. Okay, so from that perspective, I have taken this topic, but we'll do a very small discussion on this. Now, to have this discussion here, I wanted to see whether I have a map for the entire West Asia region, so that to make things a little bit more easier for you. Okay, nevertheless. Okay, stay with me. I don't have the map. Not a problem. If you see Qatar, Qatar is a part of Gulf. The Gulf countries, the major players in Gulf are Saudi Arabia, and second is UAE. These are the two most important players of Gulf. The other players of Gulf are Qatar, Bahrain, then we have Oman, and then we have Kuwait. Okay. These players are of lesser significance. Why they are of lesser significance? Because they don't wield a lot of power. While these two players are very, very important. And in today's today's webinar also have included 3 parts from West Asia. Gulf is a part of West Asia. Okay. West Asia is also called as Middle East. Now, Middle East, Gulf. In Gulf, we have number of countries. All these countries are they democracies? Are they republics? What do you know about them? No, Iran does not come under Gulf. Not at all. Iran is not a part of Gulf. The Gulf is that protruding part which comes, okay, in the map. This protruding part which comes in the map is the Gulf. Stay with me. And okay, if this is India, then this is the part which is Gulf. Okay, this is our India. Iran is somewhere here, so Iran is not a part of Gulf. Now, the Westerners, the Western countries, they call this area as Middle East. Okay, otherwise it's West Asia only. Now, stay with me. When it comes to Qatar as a country, it's a relatively smaller player. And when it comes to India-Qatar relationship, the India-Qatar relationship has primarily two components. One is the people-to-people relationship, because a lot of Indians work in Qatar and they send a huge amount of remittance to India. And second is that we are importing a lot of liquefied natural gas and liquefied petroleum gas from this particular country called Qatar. LNG and LPG imports, they are very important aspects, economic aspect of the relationship. Okay. Otherwise, we don't have a multi-dimensional relationship with Qatar. So when this event happened, whereby these 8 Navy veterans were convicted, it became a point of contention between India and Qatar. And from that perspective, let me first, before I go forward, discuss a little bit about this conflict. So what happened was that there are 8 people who were convicted in Qatar. The charges were not revealed, but it was believed that they are convicted on the basis of some kind of a espionage activities which these 8 Indians were doing. Who are these people? These are 8 Indians. They are Navy veterans. They have served in the Indian Navy. They were arrested by the Qatar authorities and a case was made against them. Who were these 8 people? What were they doing in Qatar? They were working out of Qatar. They were a part of a consultancy company and they were providing consultancy services. Now, they were the consultancy services which were being provided. They were being provided in the nature was defense consultancy. Okay. Now, these people were taken by the Qatar authorities and a case was made against them. And after this case was made against them, they were convicted and a death penalty was imposed. In this context, the India-Qatar relationship, the question was, why would Qatar go ahead with something like this? And what will India do? Should they have not talked to India first? Because see, whenever there are citizens of other countries, a case being made against other country citizens, then the countries usually talk to each other. And although we don't have that kind of a relationship with Qatar, but we don't have any problems also with Qatar. Despite that, what happened was that this became an issue, and fruitfully, the issue is now resolved because the 8 Navy veterans, they are being dissolved of their charges and they will be released also now. So this issue has actually, it was a contentious issue last year, but now it has been resolved. However, from this aspect, we need to see that when it comes to West Asia, now this West Asia, when it comes to West Asia and when it comes to the Gulf in West Asia, we are having a very good relationship with at least these 2 players, Saudi and UAE. But Qatar maybe was left behind. That also shows that we need to reach out to the players so that these kinds of conflicts don't take place. And maybe because of this reason only, the Prime Minister has gone to Qatar. He was in Qatar a few days back. And now we are reaching out. So this issue per se is not something which UPSC will ask you, but this issue tells us that the contentious points between the relationship, they need to be taken care of. And this was a contentious point. This should not have gone to the extent whereby the Qatar authorities are going ahead and sentencing them. Before that, India should have intervened. Before that, the relationship should have been such. So from that perspective, this small bit of India-Qatar aspect is added to the slides. Now, the remaining parts of the slides, they basically tell you about the timeline in which the events happened, which you can look at it at your end. This is not something which, don't remember the events. No need to remember the events. Okay. Now, this is an important aspect which I wanted you to know for PT perspective, that with Qatar, this LNG deal is signed. There is a particular company in India called Petronet. Petronet company in India, they have signed a deal with Qatar, whereby we'll be importing a lot of LNG from Qatar. And this pact is for 20 years. It will get operationalized after 2029. Okay, just remember these facts. These are very important facts, and we'll be uh, relating this aspect that with Qatar, this economic relationship of importing LNG, this is saving India $6 billion. So that's an important aspect with respect to Qatar. Huge economic benefit. Okay. Let's take the discussion forward. Then we have the next topic called Sada Tansik. Now, what is Sada Tansik? It is nothing but a one of a kind, the first time a military exercise being held between India and Saudi Arabia. So, from prelims, PT means preliminary test. Okay. From prelims perspective, you have to remember what is Sada Tansik. It's a first of a kind, one of a kind. It has never happened before. India and Saudi Arabia, they have engaged in a joint military exercise. And this joint military exercise, what does it tell us for means? It tells us India and Saudi relationship is improving. In which domain? Defense. In the defense domain, the relationship is improving. And if you see, Saudi Arabia has become a very important partner for India in the last 7-8 years. And now what we are doing is we are having a military exercise also with them. Okay, Sada Tansik. Remember this. The name you have to remember, that is it. Maiden. Maiden means for the first time. Let me read it for you. The Maiden India-Saudi Arabia Army exercise concludes the Indian contingent of the 20th Battalion of the Brigade of Guards Regiment and the Saudi Arabian contingent comprising of a group of 45 soldiers of the Royal Saudi Land Force. They participated in the exercise. Okay, just remember it for the sake of PT. Now, here I have taken a question so as to tell you what kind of a questions can be framed. This question is for you. On one hand side is written the military exercises. There are 3 military exercises. Names are given to you. These are the military exercises, as you can see. And these are the member countries which participate in these exercises. And you have to identify which of them are matched correctly. Okay. I don't see any answers coming up. Surya Kiran, India and France. Sampriti, India and Bangladesh. Shakti, India and Nepal. Okay. And the question is, which of these is or are correct? Military exercise. Fourth one is, we have 3 options. If I add the fourth one also here, Sada Tansik. Okay. Now, these kinds of questions can be asked in UPSC. So you can expect these kinds of questions. Surya Kiran is an exercise which India conducts with Nepal. Shakti is a very, very important military exercise between India and France. And Sampriti is the one which we conduct with Bangladesh. They are jumbled up here. It's a relatively easy question, I would say. Answer is B. The answer is not. They are jumbled. And similarly, the fourth point which we'll add here, Sada Tansik, it will become between India and Saudi Arabia. Okay. So for those of you who are new, please understand that in this manner also questions can be asked to you. And from that perspective, just remember this particular exercise. Let's take the discussion forward. Now we come to United Nations Relief and Works Agency, a very important topic from the examination perspective. United Nations Relief and Works Agency. What is this agency, first of all, and why we are studying this? The context of why we are studying United Nations Relief and Works Agency is that if you see here, I'll show you a certain kind of a chart. If you see here, there is a chart which talks about donations given to UNRWA. And if you see here, there are these countries: US, Germany, Japan, Switzerland, France, Canada, Netherlands, UK, Italy, Australia, Austria, Finland, and there some kind of a contribution which they are making. So in recent times, what has happened is that UNRWA has been accused that these funds which the countries are giving to this particular agency, they are being siphoned off and being used by organizations like Hamas. This is what the accusation is. What is the accusation? Israel is saying the funds which are given to whom? UNRWA. They are being siphoned away by entities like Hamas. And not only this, Israel is saying these agencies are helping Hamas-like entities. This is what Israel is saying. And because of this accusation, what has happened is this funding which is coming, this $343 million which is given by US gave in 2022 $343 billion. Is India also giving? That's a question for you. Is India also giving any kind of a aid, any kind of a funding to this agency? So different countries give funding to this agency. We'll see what the agency are and what it does. But the context is this agency is accused of helping entities like Hamas by giving their funds and also giving them some kind of a support. As a result of which, many countries, what they did is they took away the funding from UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Works Agency. What it is doing, now let's try to understand. If you see, UNRWA stands for UN Relief and Works Agency for the Palestinian refugees in the Near East. I'll talk about this now. When we talk about this particular agency, first of all, it is a part of UN. UN has many agencies. There are many agencies of UN. You all are aware about International Court of Justice. You may be aware about United Nations General Assembly. You may know about, let's say, Food and Agriculture Organization. It is also an agency of UN. You might know about UNICEF. Similarly, you have UN Relief and Works Agency. But this Relief and Works Agency works for only one purpose. It provides relief to whom? To the Palestinian refugees. That is the basic task of this agency. It was founded in 1949. You'll have to remember this for PT purpose. And it provides aid to about 7 lakh Palestinians who were forced to leave their homes in the 1948 Arab-Israel war. See, one thing which you should know is when in 1948 the war took place and these Palestinians, they had to run away from the area which is today called as Israel, they went and they took refuge in these areas. First, Gaza. Second, West Bank. And rest is the countries of Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. So in these 3 countries and 2 areas, Gaza is a particular area which is comes under the if you see the map, it comes under the territory, it comes under the occupation in a way of Israel. And then you have West Bank. Then you have 3 countries, Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. So they have all these refugees which are staying there. Who is providing aid? UNRWA is providing aid to these countries. These countries and to these areas. Now, how does this agency works? It works primarily on the basis of voluntary contributions made by member countries. Which countries? These countries, if you see the ones which I showed you earlier, they are all providing aid. They are all providing funds to this agency, as a result of which the agency is able to provide help to the Palestinian refugees. Now, let's take the discussion forward. when Israel has accused them, the accusation is that you are siphoning off these funds. So these countries are saying we'll stop the funds. And the problem is, if you see the number of funds which is being given, the blue one is the voluntary contributions. It is more than 50%. That means more than 50% of the funds this agency may not be able to get, as a result of which its agency will not be able to provide support to the refugees. And that can create a big problem, because this agency is considered as an important agency which is helping all the Palestinian refugees in those areas which we discussed earlier. A funding crunch can be a problem, can be a big problem for them. And now let me answer that question for you, which I discussed with you earlier. Yes, India is providing aid. India is also a contributor. On the contrary, I'll tell you a very interesting fact that very recently in 2020, what India has done is India has increased the funding to this particular agency so that this agency can provide relief to Palestinian refugees. But when these accusations were made, and let me show you the accusations again once. Let's read these accusations once again. Israel's accusation for UNRWA. Israel has alleged that 12 staff members of UNRWA were involved in the 7th October attack. Now, this is a big accusation. It has also claimed that Hamas siphons off funds. Siphons off funds means uses the funds which are given by the member countries, given to UNRWA, and fights from in and around the agency's facilities. Now, this is also a serious accusation. Hamas is operating from certain tunnels. Israel is saying those tunnels run below the facilities of these UNRWA agency. So it's a UN agency. One thing which you should know is any conflict area, UN can go and carry out humanitarian aid activities. So they also do that. They are saying they are in touch with Hamas. That's a pretty serious accusation. So when the serious accusation is made, funding is being taken away from them. We have not said anything. India has not said that we are going to stop our funding, but you should know that India is funding UNRWA just like other countries. But these countries, they have said that we are going to stop the funding. Okay. Now, how is UNRWA responding to this? UNRWA is saying that all these allegations are false. We are not giving any money to Hamas. And at the same time, they have initiated an inquiry against their staff members also. And as per a UN statement, 9 of the staff members who were identified, out of them, 9 of the 12 staff members who were identified, 9 have been terminated from job also. They have been thrown out of the UNRWA as of now. But they are saying that Israel's accusations are wrong. Okay. This is an important question. Why? Because if you see the UPSC previous year questions, especially of mains, you will realize that UN and its agencies are a favorite topic for UPSC. So they have asked questions on the UN related agencies. That we have to keep in mind, and that is why UNRWA becomes a very important topic from the examination perspective, both PT and mains. Okay, so both preliminary examination as well as the mains examination. So this is the context of the entire issue. Okay, this map, if you see, is telling all those areas out of which UNRWA is working out. So if you see the green patches are in either Lebanon, this is Lebanon, or Syria, or Jordan, or West Bank, or in Gaza. The 5 areas out of which this operates. Okay, just for you to have a look at it, and maybe you can remember this from the PT perspective. Remember this as a part of those small things which we remember for prelims. Okay, let's take it forward. No, there was a background. The question is, jobs of 9 are being taken away just because of Israel's accusation? No, there was an inquiry conducted, and after that, 9 people have been sacked. Okay, there was an inquiry conducted. Okay, let's come to the next topic for today. ECOWAS. Now we have discussed Europe, we have discussed Myanmar, Southeast Asia, we have discussed West Asia, Saudi Arabia, we have seen certain parts of Qatar also. Now with ECOWAS, we are moving towards Africa. Okay, that's the next part, ECOWAS. Why we are studying ECOWAS? What is this ECOWAS? Let's try to see. But first, the context. Three countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. Three countries in the Western Africa. Okay, they have quit a bloc called as ECOWAS. That is the context in which we are making this particular inquiry. First of all, if as you can see, we have this particular diagram and map which talks about ECOWAS member states. So first thing which we need to keep in mind is, for prelims, who are the member states of ECOWAS? A question can be framed out of that. If you can see, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Togo, Ghana, Benin, Ivory Coast, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Gambia, Senegal. All are members. You don't have to remember all of them, but at least the ones who have left the organization, you need to remember them. But as you can see, it is Western Africa. There is this particular community. Community here means set of countries which have come together, and these set of countries, they do something. What do they do something? They sit together and they talk about how to improve economic relationship. They come together and they frame rules and regulations with respect to trade, with respect to how things have to be conducted in the economic sphere. That is what ECOWAS, first of all, is. What is ECOWAS? ECOWAS is an economic bloc where countries of West Africa, they come together and they discuss with respect to economic cooperation. Okay, this is ECOWAS. Now, three countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. As you can see, what has been done is that these three countries have left this particular block. Why have they left it? What's the context? What are they doing? Before that, I want you to answer a question for me, because this is a UPSC question and this is directly in relation to the topic which we are discussing. There is this question which came in UPSC. The question says, in the recent years, Chad, Guinea, Mali, and Sudan caught the international attention for which of the following reasons? Discovery of rich deposits of rare earth elements, establishment of Chinese military bases, southward expansion of Sahara Desert, or successful coups. What was the reason why they were in news is a question which was asked by UPSC. So, first of all, these kinds of questions are asked by UPSC. They are expecting you to know what was going on in these countries. Okay. Now, the answer I'll tell you, but what is happening in those areas, do you have to remember that also? Yes, as a student of IR, you should know what is happening in the world. And that brings us to the issue at hand also. These three countries which have left, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, they were part of this economic bloc. But in these three countries, what is happening is, in these three countries, there were military coups. Because of the military coups, what was happening was that these countries were politically unstable. Now, why were they unstable? First of all, in these three countries, primarily, what has happened last year is military has taken over. And military has taken over because military was saying to their government that you are not able to take care of the insurgency and the terrorism. Which brings us to another aspect. In many countries of Africa, there is a problem with respect to insurgency and terrorism. Groups like Islamic State of Khorasan, groups like Islamic State, groups like Al Qaeda, they operate out of Africa. And in these countries, there is a growing threat of these terrorist outfits. The governments are unable to prohibit the activities of these terrorist groups, as a result of which the military took over the administration. That is why the military coup. And this military coup is something which is a part of many African countries. So after the military took over, what was done was that this organization called ECOWAS is saying democracy has to be restored, and until democracy will not be restored, we will not have an economic relationship with these three countries. And on the contrary, we'll place economic sanctions on these three countries. So what is ECOWAS doing? We discussed ECOWAS is an economic bloc. ECOWAS has put economic sanctions on these three countries because in these three countries there have been military coups and the military leaders are not letting democracy function there. So ECOWAS is taking a step against these three countries. Now, when ECOWAS took this step against these three countries, then these three countries, they have created a separate alliance for themselves, and they are saying we are going out of ECOWAS. We don't want to be a part of this economic bloc anymore. The problem here is, so we have few things for the PT. We have what is economic ECOWAS. We have the members of ECOWAS. We need to know who has left ECOWAS, and then we have a further analysis as to what is happening in Africa. If you see, UPSC is asking you, the answer for this is D only. Most of you have got it right. Successful coups. This is the reason for the question. These coups have been happening in Africa in the last 4 odd years. And UPSC wants you to know that, okay, do you know what was happening there? And as a result of which, what is happening is political stability is not there in Africa, as a result of which economic blocs like ECOWAS can't have a cohesive entity, and these countries can't work collectively so as to have economic and political benefits. And these military leaders who have taken over in these military coups, what are they saying? They are saying the government is not able to address the terrorist activities which are happening. We'll take care of them. So they are not ready to give back the power. Now, here, okay, I'm reading some of the doubts which are coming. Brutal impact of colonization. Absolutely good, but we'll not go into the details of that. It's a history thing, but yes, good. Aditya was asking, can we call this a brutal impact of the colonization? Yes, in a way it is. See, governments in these countries, they were supported by, these countries are primarily French colonies. Okay, so France government was supporting the government in these countries, and these governments were fighting against Islamic State and Al Qaeda like actors. But this military generals, they are not happy with them. A large section of people also are not happy with the presence of French forces. Last year, there were many protests in these countries asking the French to go back. France has stationed some forces in these countries because they are helping their governments so as to tackle these threats. But the military leaders are not liking this, and they have said that France needs to go back. A lot of people also support the same idea. As a result, there were protests against the France, and the governments were brought down in the military coups. But this democratic backsliding which has happened, this is not something which ECOWAS wants, because a very important thing is ECOWAS is saying we have to stay together. Why? We will not have economic benefits unless we can come together. And for that, there has to be a democratic framework. We cannot allow dictatorship. But these three countries, they are not agreeing to that same thing. Unfortunately, what happens is the actions of these three players may be replicated by other players also. Why? Because democracy is not something which is well institutionalized in these countries. They are all new to democracy. It's only no, for some of the countries which came out of apartheid, democracy is very, very new. Even it is new for India because it has been just a little over 70 years, and democracy requires a lot of patience. ECOWAS is not happy because they feel others will also do, or others will also take actions on the same lines, undemocratic lines. And that is where the problem is. From a broader perspective of the mains, I would say you need to understand these developments from the perspective that democracy is taking a backseat. And that's a big problem. Okay. And that is why ECOWAS is not happy. Good. Let's take the discussion forward now. So this was a little bit about ECOWAS and the recent events which have happened there. And last is the India UAE bilateral investment treaty. Now, when it comes to UAE, I have been telling my students since a long period now that UPSC has not asked a question on UAE, but a question on UAE is expected. Why? India's relationship with UAE have grown tremendously, tremendously. I'm using the word tremendously in the last few years. 2015, PM Modi, he visits UAE. This visit came after a period of 34 years. Since last 34 years, no head of the state from India visited UAE, and by 2022, 2023, 2024, what we are seeing is India UAE relationship. We have a CEPA with them, Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. It's a FTA. We have a comprehensive strategic partnership with them. Comprehensive strategic partnership with UAE. We also agreed to trade in local currencies. 2024, we are saying let's have a BIT also. Now the problem, if we are putting so much emphasis on a particular country, there has to be something there. And that will be something which you will answer at a later stage. Because in that context, the BIT has to be seen. Bilateral investment treaty has to be seen in context of improvement in India's overall relation with UAE. Improvement of India's overall relationship with UAE is a relatively new phenomena. This is not something which has been a part of always India's relationship. It is new. Why? Because only after 2015 we are seeing these changes. In IR, 10 years is a new. Okay. In IR, 10 years means it's a relatively new development. Fine. See, one important thing before I move forward, when it comes to the current affairs of IR, you should have a broad idea. The broad idea says what is happening in the 5-10 year framework. You can't simply know what is happening in 1 year framework. You should know what is happening in the 5-10 year framework. So if I see the last 9 years, relationship with UAE has substantially improved, and number of things have been done which are not a part of our topic today, but because bilateral investment treaty is a part, and bilateral investment treaty is a part of economic cooperation. So what we are having is economic cooperation with UAE. In this economic cooperation, we signed a CEPA with them. CEPA was signed in 2022, Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. What is CEPA? It is nothing but a FTA. Okay, so we have a free trade agreement with UAE in 2022. As a part of free trade agreement, which was there in 2022, what happened was that when we signed this CEPA in 2022, and whenever there will be any kind of a FTA, make this a kind of a structure. What will CEPA or what will any FTA talk about? A free trade agreement is about trade in goods and services. A free trade agreement is about resolving disputes. A free trade agreement is about intellectual property rights. A free trade agreement is about, let's say, bringing down barriers to trade. This is what a FTA is all about. Okay. So I am trying to have more trade in goods and services. I am trying to develop structures so that we can resolve the disputes. I am trying to have a proper framework so that intellectual property can be, let's say, safeguarded. IPR means intellectual property rights. Bringing down barriers to trade. Trade barriers should be reduced so that India and UAE, they can collaborate. How? Economic collaboration can happen. We are not going into political aspects or strategic aspects. We are restricting ourselves to economic collaboration only as of now, because that is the demand of the topic. So we have signed this. As a result of this, when we want UAE to come and invest in India and we want to go and invest in UAE, a very important aspect is that how will we resolve our disputes? That should be decided. What if one Indian company, let's say Reliance Industries, goes and works in UAE and they have a conflict on something in UAE? How will that be resolved? That is where the component of bilateral investment treaty comes into picture. Bilateral investment treaties are nothing but a framework which is a larger part of economic cooperation between two countries, as a result of which what we'll do, we will create frameworks. We'll create frameworks to promote and protect foreign private investment in each other's territories. Foreign private investments. Mukesh Ambani ji is going and working in UAE. Hypothetical example. I'm taking a hypothetical example. Mukesh Ambani ji going working out of UAE. He wants protection with respect to whatever investments he will do. So for that, a bilateral investment treaty is signed. Okay, that's a very important component. Let's read a little bit about this. BITs establish minimum guarantees between the two countries regarding the treatment of foreign investments, such as national treatment, fair and equitable treatment, and protection from expropriation. These kinds of protections need to be provided. Again, when we say this is being done, it is a part of this only. When we do this, because we signed a FTA, so it's better to have a BIT also. Why? The economic relationship is much, much more stronger, much more robust. That is the context. And that is the major development which has happened in the recent trip which was taken by the Prime Minister Modi. Why was Modi, the Prime Minister, visiting? The Prime Minister was visiting primarily to inaugurate the Hindu mandir, Hindu temple, which is built in Abu Dhabi, which was constructed by the BAPS Swaminarayan Sanstha. It is written here. He went there for the inauguration of the particular temple. And during that, obviously, the inauguration of the Hindu mandir or the Hindu temple is also a very important milestone in the relationship, because it shows that the government wants to have a people to people relation. P2P means people to people. We want to give this idea that we are connected at the society level also. We are connected at the economy level also through BIT. Why we are doing this? Because continuously we are trying to have a better relation with UAE. Why we are trying to have a better relation with UAE? Because there are huge prospects in UAE. What kind of prospects are there? Economic as well as strategic prospects are there. Economically, that particular area of UAE gives us remittance, hosts a lot of Indian population, and very importantly, UAE has a lot of funds which we need for the investment in India. Economic aspect of the relationship. Remittance will come, our people take employment there, and they will give us a lot of money also. UAE is important. UAE is very important from the perspective of connectivity also, because the position of UAE puts it on the global hub of trade. UAE's position is important. That is why, very important aspect. UAE is a part of India Middle East Economic Corridor. India Middle East Economic Corridor, the one which was signed on the sidelines of G20 last year, passing via UAE. In the recent visit, the two sides have signed an intergovernmental framework agreement between both for India Middle East India Middle East Europe Economic Corridor. That means, in addition to the economic benefits of having a good relation with UAE, I have huge connectivity benefits from UAE also, and that is why I am putting a lot of energy into the relationship. That is also why. Okay. So there are a number of other agreements which have been signed. Let's talk about that after the BIT part. So the Feb visit, the first point is the BIT has been signed. BIT is nothing but taking forward the FTA aspect only. So BIT has to be seen as a part of improving the economic relationship. It is not a part of FTA. It facilitates free trade. Okay. It facilitates free trade. BIT is an agreement at the end of the day, but economic idea. What else are we doing? This is important from PT perspective. The two countries have signed an agreement to link India's UPI with UAE's AANI instant payment platforms. So they have an instant payment platform through which we are going to link India's UPI, as a result of which transactions will be made more seamless. Fine. The same was also done for India's RuPay cards with the UAE's WAN card. This you will have to remember for prelims perspective. Okay, there are other agreements, other MOUs signed. MOUs are with respect to electrical interconnection and trade, and MOUs are with respect to the last point, digital public infrastructure, financial payments, archives, and heritage. On these lines, we have signed certain MOUs. One important thing, many MOUs and many agreements will be signed. You don't have to remember all of them. The ones which are coming only in the last 1 year, just have an idea about them. The ones which will be important, they will be covered again and again. And those are the ones which I'll say you have to remember. So the ones which we are discussing in the class, just remember them, more than sufficient. And don't worry too much about MOUs and agreements. But whenever there is something like IMEC or SEPA, this we will remember. Or for example, now BIT has been signed. So we'll remember this fact that BIT is signed. We'll also remember the concept of BIT, because they can ask you in a PT question, what is the concept of BIT also. So we have seen this also. Okay. Now, a very quick revision of this part. This transition is important, which I would want you to remember, or this evolution, because everything is happening as a part of this only. For those of you who are following international relations since quite some time now, they would know that every few months we have some development with UAE. That shows that there is a lot of energy. And not only that, the Prime Minister has been visiting UAE and has been inviting their head of the state also very frequently. And this frequent visits means that both countries consider each other very important. Now you may ask, sir, okay, UAE is important to us because there are economic benefits, connectivity benefits, a lot of remittances coming. We have to protect our diaspora residing in UAE. Why is UAE so much interested in India? Why are they having this BIT in India? Why are they having SEPA with India? Or why are they ready to trade in local currencies with India? What are they looking at? This is also a very important question, because this is a trend. This is not a one event that, okay, the Prime Minister has gone there. It's an event. But what's the context? These visits are happening so frequently. That means UAE also looks at India from some lenses in which they feel that India is important. And what are those lenses? They want to take benefit of the Indian markets. India is a huge market, and they will be selling their products in India primarily their products related to, let's say, crude oil and the derivatives of crude oil, they will be selling in India, and that is a huge gain for them. At the same time, India is a growing economy, rather one of the sweet spots in the global economy is India. So their investors would want to come to India and invest in India and take returns from India. And thirdly, they want India to come and invest in UAE also, because UAE knows that over a period of next 30-40 years, the world's dependency on crude oil is going to come down. So if crude oil's dependency, or if crude oil's importance as a raw material is going to come down, that means Gulf countries, whether it is Saudi, whether it is UAE, whether it is, let's say, other countries like Iraq or Kuwait, their importance will come down because they are supplying the crude oil. So now UAE says we need players because we need to reorient the economy. We have to change the economy now. Okay. We have to reduce the dependency on crude oil. So if you are reducing dependency on crude oil, then you have to, take the economy in some other direction. UAE is doing exactly this. UAE is trying to take their economy in a different direction, in which there are a number of areas. One such area is tourism. Tourism, retail sector, distribution sector, services sector, they are not developed in UAE. They want India to be an important partner, come and develop UAE's sector. Both want, and that is why a lot of these things are happening. Okay. Now, there are other areas, but that is not a part of our discussion as of today. So we'll conclude here. There are numerous areas of cooperation between India and UAE, and if UAE again comes as a part of some kind of a, let's say, it comes as a part of some issue again in current affairs, I'll again take up the issue. But as of now, you remember the economic aspect, because economic aspect is driving the bilateral investment treaty aspect. Okay, great. So, having said this, let's end the class today. We got a little late today because it was the first session, and the technical aspects will also be taken care of next time. So you will not have any problem with respect to the background and everything. That will be taken care of. And before I leave, my name is Piyush Madan, and I have been taking polity, international relations, as well as an optional also political science at Byju's itself. I have been earlier restricted to offline, but now I am trying to help you guys in the online sphere also. Yes, I hope the lecture was fruitful for you and you were able to gain something out of the lecture. And we'll work more hard and we'll improve on everything. And with respect to the aesthetics, the background and everything, which is a little bit of a problem today, or because of some technical issues, we could not start the class also. And we'll take care of all these things. And from now on, we'll be meeting more often. So I hope to see you guys, and I hope that you guys learned something from the lecture. And this section, this particular aspect has somehow added to your understanding, because I believe more in analysis. Facts are something which will be given to you as a part of PPT. Definitely, we'll be taking care of that. But I believe that a lot of you have a lot of doubts with respect to why are things happening in IR the way they are happening. So we'll try to unravel all those things as we go along in various sessions which will be scheduled in the future. And meanwhile, I'll not take more time because already it's quite late. So thank you so much, everyone, and all the best to all of you, and good night, and take care of yourself.